Hello, I'd like to devote this video towards a discussion of Aristotle's 6 rules for syllogisms. If we turn to page 243 of the course book, we can see Aristotle's rules. It's important to note that for any syllogism to be valid, it must obey all these 6 rules. However, I don't expect you to necessarily be able to have these in your mind at, on every occasion and be able to recall them when engaging with a syllogism. But I think having a broad general understanding of the kinds of things they prohibit will automatically trigger when you are engaging with syllogisms. So I think the first step is to look closely at these rules, but don't feel that you necessarily need to have them operational at the front of your mind every time you're reading a syllogism, every time you're trying to interrogate a syllogism. Um, uh, what understanding Aristotle's rules does, however, I believe, is show how sophisticated this tool of syllogism was that Aristotle developed, uh, and how much thought and technicality he put into this particular tool. So while a simple syllogism may well just look like 3 sentences, 3 propositions strung together, it may look like a very simple uh, uh, almost like a simple poem, a simple little basic elementary reasoning. However, don't be fooled by this. These are a syllogism. A syllogism is a very complex piece of machinery um, that is bound by rules, has a particular form and a particular structure that it needs to conform to. So, and once you understand the complexity of its structure, uh, then you can really get a sense and appreciation of one of Aristotle's great contributions to Western learning, and learning generally, and mathematics generally. Okay, so rule number 1, a syllogism must have 3 and only 3 terms. The usual violation of this rule is called the fallacy of the 4th term. So remember, back to our class on terms, words. So it doesn't mean that only 3 words in a particular proposition, but the critical terms that are operational and that are carried forward, or active in a crucial way to the deduction. Rule number 2, a syllogism must have 3 and only 3 propositions. Uh, there's no name for fallacy that violates this rule. There are more complex forms of syllogisms that we can look at later in the semester, but really in terms of a basic syllogism that has 3 propositions. The middle term must be distributed at least once. The violation of this rule is called the fallacy of the undistributed middle. So I think that's an important one to maybe spend a little bit of time on. Now, rule number 4, no term that is undistributed in a premise may be distributed in a conclusion. The violation of this rule is called the fallacy of the illicit minor, or the fallacy of the illicit major, depending on whether it's a minor or major term that contains the fallacy. So if we can turn back to, in this sense, the video on distributed and undistributed terms, that might also help. Okay, so rule number 5 is no syllogism can have 2 negative premises. The fallacy here is simply called the fallacy of the 2 negative premises. So those 2, 4 and 5, kind of work nicely together, that you can't move from an undistributed term to a distributed one. Rule number 5 is no syllogism that you can't have two negative premises and expect a positive conclusion. Rule number 6 is if the premise is negative, the conclusion must be negative. And if the conclusion is negative, the one premise must be negative. Yeah. So also there are a couple of corollaries also here. Corollary 1, no syllogism may have two particular premises. And corollary 2, if a syllogism has a particular premise, it must have a particular conclusion. So these are the four main, well, these are the main points, the 6 main rules and the 2 corollaries that Aristotle outlined for valid syllogisms. Have a look at these. Start to, if you can, integrate this into your analysis of syllogisms and formal fallacies, and see how you go.